Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to another episode of the Squall Growth Podcast. I am so excited for my guest today, Andrew Rea. Andrew, thank you so much for being here today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Andrew, I know you're working on something new, but would love for our audience to kind of like introduce yourself and tell us your journey.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. It's always fun to do this stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I think people in tech love to be a bit grandiose sometimes about their story. I'll try to keep like mine fairly simple. I grew up in like I start with where I grew up because it kind of like influences everything else. Like I grew up in like middle of nowhere, Ohio. My parents never went to college. They were not entrepreneurship was like a thing that people did. Like I don't know, you had like a small business, and usually the small business wasn't doing very well. So it wasn't like a thing that people did where I grew up. And so I worked my way through college, but I got interested in entrepreneurship kind of like when I was a teenager. Just like I finally like met some like real entrepreneurs when I was like 16, 17. Not long. It's a longer story that I've written about on the internet in the past, but basically I kind of just started. I'm lucky to start a company with some more experienced people when I was 20. So dropped out of school, we raised some money. That business, we like manufactured like low speed EVs. So horrible business and a much longer rabbit hole of a story, but we like did just good enough because we had a lot of distributor relationships to get it off the ground, and then we ended up selling it to somebody else a couple of years in. So that got me started. I landed at a venture fund for a little bit after that, so I did like investing in other startups, mostly like niche deep tech companies, and then I joined another startup during COVID that this company called OnDeck. They were like pretty small team still when I joined, and then that company went from like 0 to 20 million in revenue in a pretty short period of time. And we were like not that many people, so all of a sudden there were like 350 of us, and it was like very very fast growth, like a lot of companies during COVID. And then the company later kind of like also did the crash back down to reality, but I during that it was the first time I'd ever seen anything grow that quickly. So I was very lucky to be a part of that. Met a ton of folks there. Met my co-founder there actually. And so I was at that company. They scaled, raised a ton of money, all that stuff. And then I joined an earlier stage startup called at the time it was called Party Round, and then later pivoted to slash rebranded to Capital. And we were initially like a fundraising product. So we competed with AngelList around like fundraising SPVs for investors and founders. And then eventually by the end, we were doing like banking. So like the space that Mercury Row and others played in. And then like we were trying to layer payroll on top of that. So the ultimate vision was like, hey, we're going to build banking, fundraising, and payroll products. And we'll have this bundle around all of those things. And we'll give away the financial services revenue that we could be making and just make money on payroll SaaS. Actually, a couple companies still doing this, but we were really good at marketing. We had a good product, but it's really hard to build all three of those products, and so I just think it took us too long to kind of make all the pieces fit together. And so that company sold to another startup in the space here in New York, actually called Row. And I left shortly after that, or around that time, to start my current company. That we've not like made a huge marketing push yet, so we've not announced it publicly, but we will soon in a few months here. And we're working on like tax, and we basically build like tax and compliance software for companies that operate and sell across multiple different countries and states.
Very cool. And so, I mean, that's an interesting journey going from kind of on the EV hard tech. I imagine that was a hardware business was the first one.
Yes, yeah, yeah. We
And,
manufacture stuff very hard. Software is easier.
and then kind of evolving right to on deck and so like what was kind of that learning experience from the hardware go to market to going to on deck and going to party round capital that really brought it shaped your thinking on go to market, right?
Yeah. I think so honestly, I think that first company, I was just lucky to be in the room. I was like 20, I didn't know what go to market was, to be honest. I was just like, I'm not, like I want to build companies, and like yeah. And so my co-founders in that business were they'd built multiple businesses in the recreational vehicle industry. So they sold a company to another like they built this really niche braking system that's used in a bunch of like RVs. If you've ever seen a RV towing a car behind it, it's almost surely using their braking system.
Oh,
And so they built that company and sold it. And so the real answer to like why that business had any success at all, and honestly was like not really a success, but we had some initial sales success. And that largely just came down to the fact that my co-founders knew all the distributors already. And
mm,
so I guess like the like main lesson when I don't think I took this away initially, but looking back, it's like that company shouldn't, honestly, I don't even think that people that bought it, like, I don't know, there was some value there, but it's like, it was like not an insanely successful company, but there was like something of value there purely because my co-founders had all of these distributor relationships. So takeaway is like unfair advantages are a thing. And so to the extent that you have them, especially when it comes to distribution, you should definitely leverage them. And this is true for almost any company, any founder, any marketer. Like you have something, it might be small, but there is an unfair advantage. If you have that, leverage it. And so, that honestly had nothing to do with me. That had everything to do with my co-founders. And then venture, I can't say I did like. I will say the companies that we invested in that had the most success also like had an unfair advantage on the distribution side. We invested in this company that did extremely well during COVID because we basically made like rapid. Originally, we were making like rapid testing kits for when think like a nuclear event hopefully never happens, but if it were to happen, like these were like stocked up as like rapid tests to triage folks that like got hurt or like had some kind of exposure to radiation. And so that was actually very easy to pivot into COVID testing when the world shut down. And we had like a bunch of like people with like deep government relationships. And so all of a sudden we were like selling to the state of Hawaii so they could open back up and let people fly in again. And so that company went from $0 to $100 million in revenue, like that. But it like mostly because right place, right time, good enough product, but like we knew the people to sell to, which is the entire game when you're selling to government. So I think like I think unfair advantages is just a huge part of doing anything successfully, and then doing something different. So at I'd say at both OnDeck and Capital, the two startups that I was at most previously that were pretty formative to my career. OnDeck, we really leveraged Twitter. Actually, both companies really leveraged Twitter as a growth channel and just like platform. And both of our co-founders had extreme audiences of their own, and they had a lot of relationships in Silicon Valley that made everything that we did successful. And at Party Round specifically in the early days, we did a lot of they're called drops in consumer, but we did a lot of like stunty marketing that would kind of temporarily hijack attention on tech Twitter. And people didn't even know what our product was. They didn't know what we did, but people had heard of this company. It's like, what's Party Round? What do they do? What do they do? And like people were talking about it. And that gave us like, that let us punch way above our weight class in terms of where we were actually at as a company and with a product, because just people had heard of us and thought what we did was cool, even if they didn't actually know what we did. So unfair advantages and do something different than what everybody else is doing. I think those are like, to the extent that I have like huge hardcore learnings, it's probably those two things. And then maybe a third around like like most of the actual work of distributing, doing go-to-market, doing sales, whatever. It's pretty like, it's actually very unglorious and very unsexy. Even if the end output looks cool, like all of the work into the output that looks cool is very, it's hard work. It's a schlep, and you get told no, quite a bit.
yeah. I mean, that's the truth in marketing, right? Is that a lot of it the output, it's simple, it's beautiful, but to get to that takes a lot of hard work, and it's pretty unsexy. It's pretty
100%.
It's pretty not glorious. But I love you mentioned Twitter, right? And this is consistently one of the harder platforms for marketers to crack, for companies and startups to really tap into. What do you talk about distribution there, but you also, I know Party Round was, definitely a flashy Twitter brand and had a lot of fun there. I remember getting the marketing as well. You want to talk a little bit about, what do you think about making Twitter work as a channel and distribution channel?
Yeah, I think the channel has changed so much over the years. Like, I'm a relatively recent Twitter user. Like, I don't think I got on there until like 2020. And even then, I barely used it. Like the first year I was on the platform, or barely did post it at least. And then it's changed a lot too since Elon bought it. So I think I do think it's tricky. It's like one of those platforms that I think if you approach it as like, how do I make my company successful on Twitter? It's almost the wrong way to approach it. You want to find the best thing you need to do is like every platform has its own set of like influencers, its own set of just like behavior patterns, like, and those things are always like changing. So you got to use it. You just got to be in it, and you got to know like who's doing what, especially in like your niche. Like there's like a type of Twitter for everything. There's a tax Twitter, there's a CPA Twitter, there's a finance Twitter, there's a tech Twitter. And so you can kind of find these circles. And if you're in an audit long enough, you'll figure out kind of your own voice and like the things that are more likely to go viral than not. So I think that's like step one is just get really familiar and figure out where your people are on Twitter, and then just start like you have to start posting. But also I think the big actual growth tactic to get started is just like very, if you're trying to grow a personal account at least, very responding well, like figuring out like what is a good response to somebody that's high profile that doesn't look like you're just they call them reply guys, like having a tasteful response to somebody who's saying something that's likely to attract their followers who they probably already have a big following to you is another tactic that works pretty well.
Really?
And then I think just generally, like this is true for LinkedIn too, individuals over brand accounts. Like brand accounts, like there's value there. But if you're trying to do anything as a newer company or a startup, like you should, like if you're a marketer right now and you're listening to this, you should like probably build your founder's brand before you try to go really hardcore on your company brand. And if you're a founder, like definitely, like no one gives a I don't know if I can tell some of this podcast, but nobody cares about your like your company that no one's ever heard of, but they might care about you, the founder story. So
It's so funny that you say that. So I really loved the first part that is there is that a lot of people think that marketing is all about talking, about pushing something, right? When really these social platforms in today's modern marketing world is really about deep listening, right? First, and really understanding and then becoming part of the community to really grow. Twitter, TikTok, especially Reddit, in these platforms that it's more pull now than push, it seems like.
100%. Yeah.
And I really, think about the other thing that I've seen, and we had another person on the show. I'll link to her episode, Haley Pavoni, another excellent entrepreneur, about building your own personal brand. And she's really focused on TikTok with her company, has done very well there. But then that personal versus corporate. So first question when I had is, have you seen personally these platforms like limit distribution of corporates? Because I feel like there's this idea, and talking to a lot of people, is that, hey, if you have your corporate logo as your profile pic, you're going to get less distribution because they know they have the machine learning to say, hey, that's a company. We need money for distribution. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it's definitely a thing. I think it's a mix of like, I think a lot of it is like, sure, they want you to spend money on ads. And so there is that factor of it. I think some of it though has to do with the user, the consumer of these platforms. Like I think people, like I know this, like I do not, it takes a lot for me to credibly care about what a brand has to say. And even then I'm still like, oh, this is a company, this is a brand. And I think generally like people don't trust institutions and brands the way they used to. And so whereas like, I'm much more, so a good example of this is like Brian Chesky of Airbnb. If you notice, like Airbnb has tons of followers on Twitter or LinkedIn, but when Brian Chesky, the founder and CEO, posts, like it's so much more engagement than anything the company account has to say. And then I think a lot of it's just like, it is like, what do people trust these days? And right now we are in this era where we trust a lot fewer brands. And even to the extent that we trust the brands, a lot of that trust is actually rooted in like, do I trust the founder and the people behind this company? And a lot of it's rooted in that versus like the brand of the company itself. And then there is the reality. Like I'm not behind the scenes seeing what Twitter and TikTok or anybody else are doing with no one is, right. But I'm absolutely sure they're deprioritizing for various reasons these company accounts. So for what like you can debate the why and if that's okay or not, but the game on the field is that way. So you kind of have to play the game on the field.
Well, they have to make money, right? Somehow. So I can't blame them for that because we're all on their platforms trying to make money too. So
100%. Yeah. Yeah. It's they have the users and the network effects. So we have to play to their ecosystem. It is the reality of our world today.
And I really like that you put that thing about trust, right? Though, for the people and the founders getting out, because oftentimes I'm coaching clients, prospective clients is saying, my number one piece of advice that I've seen in the last, at least 24 to 36 months is a founder-led brand, founder-led marketing tends to outperform any influencers that you can hire, any of the expensive agencies, videos, and all that, because I feel like it's true as what you're saying is that when a founder comes up and you write something, it's authentic, it's real, and it resonates. People can sense bullshit on a video. People see an influencer and know it's bullshit, and they don't
Totally.
want to buy it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well said.
how do you feel though? Is like, and you're about to go on this journey as well as a founder and putting yourself out there. Is that's scary? Like Twitter, especially, is scary for founders, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
People get lit up.
I think it's less scary for me because I've been there. I've been on the platforms for a little bit. So like I have something of a following on Twitter. It's small, like relatively speaking, but it's small but engaged. And same with like LinkedIn. And I think that I've just done it. I've been a part of it for previous startups. So it's less of a black box to me than I think it is for some founders. And there's that side of it. And then too, like I've been more active in the last few months, despite the fact that we've not formally launched my current company yet. Mainly because I know we are gonna like be doing a marketing push in the future, and so it's like I'm kind of just like warming up, you might say, and even just like with us like talking a little bit about what we're doing and our journey to this point. I've been shocked at some of the inbound that we've had that's like ended up being really like, valuable to the company. Like we talked right before the recording started about increasing your surface area of luck, and that is like I think one of the biggest reasons to do it. Um, and so yeah, I think for me it's like we're I've already done it enough in other capacities that I had something of a feel for like where it could be useful and opinions, I guess, of like what was good, what was bad, and then a little bit of my own following, which like helps. I'm not starting from pure zero, so I can kind of like I already have like people that know who I am and like know what I've done before and are like somewhat familiar with my story. So that it's nice when you have at least even if it's small, like some kind of small foundation that you can start with.
Absolutely. And I think that, I think that relates to what you said earlier on kind of getting active on the platform and listening before you start promoting. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, we're not launched yet. I have nothing to sell. And like, that's the best part of like when you can approach people and you have nothing to sell. Everyone wants to talk to you then because there's
100%.
no change.
Yeah, totally. I think this is actually something that more companies and more brands will leverage in the future is that I think there's just totally like the best marketing, especially in B2B, I think just provides so much value and it's not about selling, it's about doing something that's like valuable, interesting, and resonant to whoever your buyers and customers are. And if you do that, and you are just associated with that, it's like eventually when they are in the market to buy whatever your thing is, you'll at least be top of mind and you'll very likely be one of the places they at least go visit. And so I think there's like a stat somewhere that like only like 3 to 5% of the market is ever in a buying state at any given time. So most of your buyers in like the context of like a B2B company are like not even like buying today. And so you want to be like aware and top of mind for them, building trust with them, and just like being a human and just genuinely being helpful. It's like no different than how you build relationships in the real world, but you're just doing it with a little bit more scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And you have to get that when someone's ready to buy, and sometimes you're in an event driven business, right? I'm like right now I'm running a boutique. And so a lot of my clients are engaging me from an event driven. They're either firing their current agency, they have a new funding round, and they're figuring out where to effectively spend the money. They just lost a key employee, event driven. But if you're not top of mind, the business won't come to you. And that's
Totally.
a little bit about this networking and where you're spending your time online. But something interesting, going back to like being active online and founder-led brands, how did you start to overcome that fear of putting yourself out there? Because that's scary.
Sure. Yeah. I think I don't know if there was like ever a moment. I think it's like small and gradual. Like even
Me.
before I started a company, or was even like working in like I was head of growth at the last startup I was at. Like even before I was like in those spots, I think writing has always been something specifically that is a little more natural to me, and so I think I started there. Like I like doing video and stuff. Still is like feels weird to me. I'm a bit of an introvert, but it's like I think Writing though, it's much more placed on my strengths. So I kind of had like a little bit of, I just did it a little bit, and then like some of it like went well. And I think you kind of see, oh hey, like I'm not. I posted this thing on LinkedIn and I didn't die. Like no one like I didn't get fired. No one killed me. Like people didn't weren't like you're the stupidest person I've ever seen in the world. Like so all of those like imposter syndrome and stuff. Like if you just do it a little bit, I think you'd be surprised. A lot of it's just like doing it and being willing for some of your early stuff to like not be as good as what hopefully your later stuff will be. Like at any given point in time, what you're creating today will almost surely not be as good as what you can create in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And so like it's just you're never as good as you want to be. So to some extent you have to be okay with like maybe being a little bit cringe in the early days. So I think for me like a lot of it was that, and then just being around people that did it and did it well is another thing. Like it kind of puts a model in your head for like, oh hey, like this is just like this is doable because it's like even if like I didn't see them writing, like I might be on Twitter. This may not be perfect, and I'm going to do stuff that like might be like not the best thing I could ever do, but like I will get better through that process of putting myself out there and then iterating. Like one of the great things about social media is, and any kind of content is it's incredibly tight feedback loops. So you get feedback really quickly and you can iterate on that really quickly. So it's better to not overthink it and just like do something even if it's going to be imperfect, and then you'll get better over time.
I think that is such great advice, and it's so hard for a lot of founders and leaders to embrace is that you're going to put out an imperfect product, and the imperfect product in a way is you, right? You're representing yourself, and we're human, we're not perfect, but you have to market yourself, which is V1, right? It's a very tough thing versus the doing of social could be, it's easy. You get it, there's a bunch of formulas, right, to create content, everything, but actually the emotional, the thought process behind it tends to be the block in a lot of folks from achieving this and overcoming that distribution.
I think that's true for most of the hard things in life. It's our biggest battles are always within ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and then so with this background, maybe you can tell us a little bit more on how are you thinking about the approaching your go-to-market strategy for your new company? How are you in as especially now is that you're sitting in the CEO role, right? And you're having to inspire other folks to execute these strategies, right? How do you think about
No, it's a good question. I think so. I think for there's kind of a couple of questions within that. So on the first one of like doing go to market in the early days, I think a lot of it, like if you're in B2B, at least like as I am, a lot of it comes down to you're trying to understand if people have like if you've got some kind of thread of an idea or problem you're trying to solve, you're trying to understand that from the customer's perspective. The first thing you should be doing is not marketing or even selling, but more trying to understand that pain. So, but the great thing about that, if you do it well, is that you actually can start formulating, you like start building relationships with eventual customers. And so you actually kind of like our first 6 months of the company was just like we were doing pure customer discovery and market research, trying to understand like we had felt the pain of the problem that we solve. Of that, there's just like in our specific case, state and local compliance, both in the US and then internationally, just is incredible. As you're building a scaling company, if you're hiring in all these different places, you're operating a company that might have to register like with some kind of like local permitting and licensing if you have like a physical presence. And then just like for things like sales tax and VAT tax, if you're selling across these different places, it can be a nightmare to deal with a lot of this stuff. So I felt that pain very viscerally at a previous company. And so if you felt it, you kind of got some kind of a thread, and then you're just talking to tons and tons of customers and trying to formulate like, how do I even do this? How do we approach it? And that was the first 6 months of the company. But the great thing about that is you build relationships with all of these people. So it's like you're not doing sales, you're not doing marketing, but you kind of are though at the same time if you're doing it correctly. And it'll be weird. Like people like I had folks that I like some controller that I meet will randomly think of me or like 2 months later, like, hey, are you like working on this thing? Because I just met this other person that's dealing with it, and you should talk to them. And so you kind of do start to build some momentum with that. You also are learning too. You're not just learning how to build a product and how to solve the problem, but you're also learning like how to do the like marketing. Like a lot of like your best copywriting for I don't know, like some kind of like marketing campaign you want to do or blog post is going to come from under like how your understanding of how whoever your customer is feels about the thing that you solve. So it all builds, it's all like ultimately part of the same thing. Even if you're attacking it from different angles. And then the great thing is like for sales, like your early customers often can come from that period of like market research, customer discovery, just like really understanding the problem from the customer's point of view. Our first customers came from that. And then you can kind of start like doing, honestly, a lot of it's just like pure ground and pound, like building relationships, leveraging existing relationships and getting in front of people. And then I think eventually you can kind of like start taking that and turning into some level of marketing. So like we've done like a blog post that's a little bit about like our experience getting to this point in time that we had actually a few customers reach out from that. We've like talked about it a little bit more on like social media. So it's just, I think it's much more like it starts really, really small and it becomes a groundswell over time. And then eventually you kind of like can start doing more systematized marketing, which is kind of the stage where we're at now, where we're like starting to think a little bit more long term about like what is our gain market strategy beyond like this very grassroots thing that we're doing right now. And so I think in terms of like the second piece of your question as a founder, I actually think at the early stages, if you're like a founder CEO, you should probably be doing the majority of it. We definitely like setting the vision and the strategy, but you should also be doing like most of especially on the sales side, like you should be doing founder-led sales. And so I think that's like, you shouldn't hire at least full-time too early. And then I think to the extent that you are hiring people to help you on the marketing side of things, it's more to help scale ideas that you have, and not necessarily like I'm default skeptical if someone's going to come in that has no context on my business and like do marketing for me, like make my company successful. Like I just like don't think that's going to work because they don't understand. No matter how good an agency like you or anybody else is, it's going to be hard for them to get my context and understand my industry. So you should be setting the strategy. You should be doing at least some of the work in the early days to figure out how you're going to market, especially if, for instance, if you're doing founder-led marketing and you're trying to build a brand and a voice around yourself, like you got to do the work to figure out, like a ghostwriter, just a pure ghostwriter with zero context is not going to do well for you. You should be like figuring out your own voice and figuring out what resonates. So do the work. Honestly, you just got to do the work and show up. And then as you do that, you can figure out like, if you're going to do a podcast or something like that, like you can find people that help you produce that. If you're trying to do like short form content, you can find content writers that can like help. We're going to do a ton of content marketing on this thing, and this is the strategy. And then like you can find people that actually help scale your time on that, whether it's hiring full time or an agency. But a lot of, again, like you got to do the work, or else like no one else is going to build your business for you. No one's going to like plug in and like boom, all of these customers and all this great marketing. It's solved. So I think it's like it starts grassroots. It starts from understanding your customer. It starts from like doing the work, like understanding their pain. And then same thing on the marketing side. You got to like do the work to build your product, do the work to understand your customer. And you have to do the same thing to figure out like how to market it, how to sell it, how to like effectively build a brand and scale that, even if you're not the one doing all the work eventually.
Awesome. So then, Andrew, maybe you can give us a few last pieces of advice for founders, and marketers working in early stage startups. Like, what would you give them for that kind of go-to-market advice and building their channel?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I'm just like one person trying to figure out as much as most of us. So I don't think I have some crazy big insights, but I think most of the stuff I touched on earlier is just like, you gotta, if you're trying to build a brand, get distribution, do marketing today, I think founder-led marketing, like people over brands, is just a thing I think you can lean into right now. Like be human and lean into like individual people over like a corporate brand. Be real. Like I think like it has to be like really, really authentic and play to your advantages. So play to your advantages uniquely, whatever that is. It's going to be different things for different people. Then you got to do something different than like what every single other company around you is doing. If everyone around you is only doing product marketing on LinkedIn, maybe you should consider doing something that's not just pure play product marketing in your content or whatever it is. So be different, play to your strengths, and brand like people over corporate brands. I think are like the three biggest things that I believe in right now. I don't know, but like I think the general meta thing is you just have to do the work, show up, and keep trying things because like nothing comes easy or overnight. Generally speaking.
Absolutely. Andrew, thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Chris. Appreciate it.